they was racing about all day, Chris, but the restarts, every one of them, from the stages and the cautions and everything else, was just absolutely breathtaking, I guess, if you're a fan. And
the restarts were big, and that's where they made up their most time, and it's 5 wide and maybe 6 wide a couple of times.
Jimmie was doing a good job. He was the only car at the second stage that was on from Legacy that was in the lead lap, and then if you want to grade it, I think it was a real good race for the fans.
The good cars could go down low and pass. It wasn't a freight train parade up at the top. They'd run the middle groove to get out of the dirty air. They'd go all the way down to the bottom. So the track's really good for racing right now, I think. It's grayed up good. It's a good racetrack.
Monday morning after Kansas, here at Petty Museum and Level Cross, Richard's somewhere off on a motorcycle ride, and filling in for Richard, which ain't hard to do, is my son-in-law, Chris Hussey. It's got a background in racing. And Chris, I guess you had to watch the race, yes, know you was going to do this.
I actually watched the entire race, probably the first one in a long time, but I did.
You mean you stayed awake to watch it, right?
It was close. Before that last green-white checkered, I did go brush my teeth and turn the covers down.
Okay, yeah, I figured that. Yeah, well, I was in Kansas, and of course it was a 3-hour delay and everything, and we stayed dry and watched the Formula One race, and then everybody was pretty calm that we was going to get it in. There was a big rain cloud, I think, just settled over the racetrack, and everything else was calm. But talking about the legacy cars, normal thing, qualifying, took off. Corey finished, he stepped in again this week for Eric, and Eric's supposed to be back at Darlington. He sat on the pit box in front of me, and he was pretty calm. And of course, the pit stop came fairly early in the first stage. It started around 35 laps and everything. Of course, first thing Corey does is speed on pit road and get himself a lap down and just running the same speed as everybody. But they was racing about all day, Chris, but the restarts, every one of them, from the stages and the cautions and everything else, was just absolutely breathtaking, I guess, if you're a fan. And what'd you see on television?
That's about the way it looked on TV. Restarts were big, and that's where they made up their most time, and it's 5 wide and maybe 6 wide a couple of times. But the restarts is worth watching.
Yeah, and they was, the rain helped the crowd down a lot, but these people, I guess, that sat in the stands, it never was a pouring down rain. Most time just a drizzle, a little bit of hard rain, but they dried the track quick, and then when the cars got on the racetrack, they dried pit road. But I guess there was 3 or 4 cars that just stayed up front all day. The 5 car stayed there most of the day, and he wound up winning the race by the closest of margin, and the 11 car was a big player, and the 1 car was a big player. Then he faded, but if you went to the racetrack and you didn't have a favorite, it would have been a good race to watch.
Yeah, well, one thing they didn't talk about a lot was tire fall off and tire wear. They showed some of the tires, and they were courting, and I saw some more photos this morning, certainly of Larson's tires that came off at that last caution, and boy, it was going to be close for them to make it. The tires were really worn, and that's a good thing,
I guess. Yeah, no, tire fall off is good because that gets back to tire management, but tire wear out, you can't. I just don't like that in racing, and like they had at Bristol and some other places. But getting back to the legacy cars, which I watched absolutely nothing hardly but the 43 car, and he run good laps. He just and finally got back on the lead lap, and I guess he done 2 tires there at the end, and coming to the checkered, he is running 9th, and about 100 yards out, he wound up going over the start-finish line, I guess, spinning, and wound up 22nd. But Jimmie was doing a good job. He was the only car at the second stage that was on from Legacy that was in the lead lap, and then on the restart, he got punted, and
yeah, he saw if you watch the replay, he saw the smoke up ahead, and he checked up, and the car behind him, 7 car, did not, and it just ran all over him.
But he's getting back to Jimmie. He runs very few races, but he's adapting to this car a little bit. But it's just it's amazing up front how fast they run, and then all of a sudden the whole race is running the same speed. Not much passing going on, a little bit of racing mid pack and everything, and I don't know. It was I think it was if you want to grade it, I think it was a real good race for the fans and for the television audience.
Well, and the good cars could go down low and pass. It wasn't a freight train parade up at the top.
Okay.
The good cars when the 11, the 5, and some of those guys come through the pack, they would run high until they got to somebody, and they'd go down low, and they swept the track, as I like to say. They swept the track pretty good with. They'd run the middle groove to get out of the dirty air. They'd go all the way down to the bottom. So the track's really good for racing right now, I think. It's grayed up good. It's a good racetrack.
It was a good racetrack for this type race car and these driver styles. And I'm still not a big fan of the stages, but they still going to have them. And But the cream of the crop stayed at the top all day, and I guess we've had 2 races this close, and of course it's been Chevrolet and Toyota, and Ford still hadn't won a race, but gosh, they've been so close and so competitive. It's just like a baseball game or a football game. It can go any way, and with the rain delay and everything, we got through Kansas and probably had one of the better races we've had all year. For the fans and the television audience. And then coming up this week, we go back to the track too tough to tame, I guess, Darlington, and that forever that's been a good track for a Ford for some reason. I don't know where it's the torque of the engine or Ford's always been good at Darlington, and can you stay awake for another one, you think?
I might can if I don't have Monday off, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I hope it goes off of schedule. I hate the delays and everything, the rain delays, for everybody concerned, because it affects a lot of people. The planes that was bringing the crews home and everything at the racetrack and the television people, it just was a big change yesterday. But I don't know who would be favored. Of course, Eric's back in the 43 this week, and he's won 2 races at Darlington, so that tells that he is good at Darlington. I just hope the team puts a good setup under him, and of course we'll be looking, and it'll be the same ones you got to beat every week.
It will. When I think about Kansas, I think I told this story the other day. We went out there. The first race was going to be on September 30th of 2001. The track was done. We went to test the first week in September. And when I say we, the Petty organization, all three cars here went out there to test. And on the last day of the test, I don't know where these grasshoppers come from, but they were the biggest grasshoppers I've ever seen. And if you went out and run 3 laps and come in, you had to clean the windshield, clean the front of the grill off. I mean, it was clogging up the grill. It was huge grasshoppers. And even when we got back to the shop, they were inside our haulers. And we fought grasshoppers for a long time. Second part of that story is the following week, the second week, was the rest of the NASCAR teams went out. And that would have been September 11th. And that's when a lot of teams got caught out there and had to rent cars and drive home because they shut down all the flights and stuff. And so we still went back in 2 weeks and raced and everything. Or 3 weeks later went back and raced. But that's some of my memories of Kansas, just the very first years.
Now, I wasn't in on that grasshopper thing or none of that other stuff driving home, but let me bring you up to speed on one. Me and Mary watched the Braves pretty faithfully, and they were in Portland, Seattle, or somewhere last week, and they was at the race at the ball game. They was serving grasshoppers, and I'd never heard of that. And the announcers, I think there was $9 a piece, and some of them was eating them. And Some of them got them down pretty good, but some of them kind of turned their nose up. So I don't know about grasshoppers. They'd be a lot better on a race car than they would be going down a throat.
I guess last night was a good example that they'll always go back to the photo versus the transponders on the cars. And obviously the 59 Daytona 500 didn't have transponders on cars, but the scoring transponders are located in the rear of the car. And so a car as fast as they're going could have a run on another car, and the transponders say one thing and the photo finish says the other. So they proved last night that they're not going to live and die by electronics. They're going to go back to the photo, and that was something I was kind of caught off guard by. Which they're right, and they made the right call. It's just the transponder is not the gospel in this situation.
See, I don't understand none of that stuff. You know what I mean? But I happened to be at Daytona in 1959 when Lee won the race. And it was not a photo finish by NASCAR. They took fans' pictures and evaluated them. And I knowed it was going to be close, and I went up to the start-finish line myself, and I knowed Lee had won the race. And then when they announced that Beauchamp won it, I couldn't believe it. And, of course, I think me and Richard Maurice and maybe some of the rest of them brought the cars home, and Lee and Miss Petty stayed down there. And I think Bill France was smart enough to milk it. He knew who won the race, but he just milked it with the press and everything, and it just got big news. But the thing about that race, there was no stages and no cautions at all for 500 mile and the first one on the biggest super speedway of the time. But and it wasn't near as close as, I mean, it was close. It was a half a car length, but it wasn't near as close as Kansas yesterday. My worst memory of Darlington was 1970 when I thought Richard had left us. We'd wrecked a Superbird in practice and come home and got the Roadrunner, which was a short track car to go back and had to race the 500 with. And then, of course, of all the pictures of him wrecking that thing, his arm all out the window, his head all out the window, then landing right in front of us upside down and just hanging there with his hands laying against the roof of the car because he was pretty long and lean. And then me and Richie Bars goes out and trying to get him out, and we kind of unhooked the seat belt, and when he kind of we slowed down his fall a little bit to the roof, but he said, and I know right then he was alive, but I thought he had left us. And then, of course, he wound up just having probably a concussion for sure, and we didn't register that, but he had a dislocated shoulder, and, of course, that brought on the window net, and, of course, safety with NASCAR is still a big factor no matter what the area is, and they still work on it even today.
For me, without a doubt, the 1993 Southern 500 with Mark Martin. Same thing, fought rain all day, red flags and so forth, and anyway, winning the Southern, I'm a purist at heart, and winning the Southern 500 was big deal for me.
Chris,
yeah.
Check will be in the mail.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm used to that.